welcome back to Asian Oddities. This episode is about haunted hotel stories. In fact, it's quite easy to encounter ghosts when staying in hotels. That's why there are many superstitions in Chinese folklore. For example, you shouldn't stay in the last room at the end of the corridor, and before entering a hotel room for the first time, you should knock on the door as a polite reminder to any spirit that, "Excuse me, no offense, just stay for the night." This content includes 5 stories, and I'll split them into 2 episodes. If you like this theme, feel free to like and subscribe. Every Saturday night, Asian Oddities will share true creepy stories from Asia, so without further ado, let's get started. Back in the 90s, there was this big home renovation trend sweeping through our neighborhood. Pretty much every household started remodeling and redecorating. One hugely popular thing was installing these massive wall-length mirrors, with people saying it would make rooms look brighter and bigger. But the bizarre incident that happened after caused pretty much everyone around here to rip those giant mirrors back out in a panic. It all went down at this one house that had put in the huge mirrors. From what I know, they had these floor-to-ceiling mirrors installed in both the master bedroom and living room, making the place look like a dance studio. The owner had also converted it into a rental property for travelers, and it was one of the female tenants who this creepy stuff happened to. She was from out of town, renting the place for 2 months while on a work assignment here. But just in her second week, we saw her hastily packing up and leaving a heated dispute with the landlord. From bits and pieces, we gathered that shortly after moving in, the poor woman started suffering terrible headaches for no apparent medical reason. She accused the rental of being substandard, maybe having formaldehyde issues or something. The landlord denied it, but to avoid the escalation, just refunded the rent. After that episode, the landlord couple decided not to keep renting it out anymore and moved into the place themselves. But strangely, it wasn't long before the wife also started experiencing frequent, severe headaches that felt like someone violently pulling her hair. It got so bad she had to take medical leave, but nothing seemed to provide lasting relief. And ever since falling ill, she started witnessing bizarre occurrences too. Like she'd been washing dishes in the kitchen, glance over at the living room mirror, and catch a shadow figure quickly darting across it. Or right as she turned off the lights for bed, a shape would flash across the bedroom mirror for just an instant. At first, she dismissed it as her mind playing tricks, since she and her husband were staunch materialists who didn't believe in supernatural mumbo-jumbo. But then even weirder incidents followed. They had a close neighbor who sometimes bring her little toddler over to visit. Not long after the mirrors went up, suddenly the kid would throw tantrums and started wailing every time at their place. The worst time, the toddler actually slapped the wife hard enough to leave her face swollen and bruised up, which seemed unbelievable for a 2 or 3-year-old to have that kind of force. The neighbor profusely apologized, but they all just chalked it up as bizarre and tried to move past it at the time. Then one night, it was just a wife home alone as her husband worked the night shift. In a daze, she saw a bright light in the room that suddenly woke her up in the middle of the night. She saw the light with this blinding beam emanating from inside the mirror itself, like from a flashlight. She instinctively shielded her eyes, but as her gaze shifted upward, she was horrified to see a woman's head positioned on the ceiling above, her long hand in here and outstretched arm just grazing the wife's head, violently pulling at her hair. The nightmarish vision paralyzed her for a few seconds until she finally screamed and ran out of the room. She ran right into the concerned neighbor who had heard the commotion. Then she recounted the terrifying vision and spent the night at the neighbor, just too shaken to return to her own home. The next day, they brought in a feng shui master to examine the place. He explained the woman was likely an earthbound spirit. She died in the haunting Tangshan earthquake when her long hair got caught on the exposed rebar while fleeing, leaving her horrifically hanged when the building collapsed on top of her amid the rubble. After that, pretty much everyone in our area dismantled their wall-length mirrors, and unsurprisingly, that building became stigmatized as a haunted residence that steadily emptied out over time. In Chinese culture, mirrors are seen as the gateways between the living and the spirit worlds. So my guess is that the trapped ghost was basically confined to the house, and installing the mirrors opened the portal, allowing her to make harmful contact with the physical realm, which is why she could physically pull the wife's hair like that. When my little brother was 6 years old, we went to visit our grandparents for Chinese New Year. We always stay for a few days, so we booked some rooms at the hotel across from Grandma's place in advance. One room is for us to sleep in, and other rooms are used for relatives to gather and play poker and mahjong. It was an old, run-down, low-rise hotel. After dinner, we headed to it to start playing cards. Around 8:30 p.m., my brother fell asleep in the mahjong room. It was late winter and freezing, so my mom decided to carry him back to our room so he wouldn't catch a cold. My brother was sleeping like a log, didn't even wake up when mom gently put him on the bed and tucked him in. The mom went to take a shower, but not long after, she heard my brother crying and calling for her. She immediately rushed out with just a towel and found him shivering under the covers. Mom thought he had a nightmare, so she tried to comfort him. But when touching my little brother's forehead, he was burning up and drenched in sweat. He must be in a high fever, but it was so strange since he seemed perfectly fine earlier. Then mom decided to take him to the hospital. Just when she was preparing to get into the bathroom to get dressed, the little brother suddenly shouted, "Mom, don't go in. A man just went inside." Thinking he was delirious from the fever, mom was even more anxious. But then a frantic knocking bursted out at the door, which startled mom. She thought he was dead and went to open it, but no one was there, not even in the hallway. As mom stood confused by the open doorway, my brother cried out, "Mom, a family is floating in, passing through your body." By then, mom was terrified because she was standing right at the entrance but didn't see anyone. "Baby, you're ill. I'm taking you to the hospital. Don't scare me like that," mom said, trembling. But my brother went on with some even more chilling words. "It's true, Mom. A whole family came in. A woman in a red dress, a little boy, 2 old people, and a man went into that bathroom." By now, Mom was paralyzed with fear. Maybe because of over fear instead of fleeing, she jumped under the covers with my brother and they hid there tightly, not daring to even breathe. After a few minutes, the phone on the TV cabinet started ringing, but Mom didn't dare answer it. They just huddled silently under the blanket. After who knows how long, my brother couldn't stand being cooped up under there any longer and flung off the covers. What he saw then would haunt his nightmares forever. The woman in the red dress was standing at the foot of the bed staring at them. Her hair was long and black, her face ghostly pale with hollow black pits for eyes that oozed blood. At the end of the bed crouched the bluish white boy who said to my brother, "I'm so cold. Can I come play with you?" The 2 old people sat rigid on the hotel chairs, while the man had disappeared into the bathroom without returning. Then my brother passed out from sheer terror. Eventually, Dad came looking for them. The ringing phone was his call. Since Mom didn't answer it, he got worried and came to the room to check. Actually, his knocking almost pushed Mom on the verge of a breakdown. Finally, he gets the courage to open the door in tears, asking Dad to take my brothers to the hospital before further explanation. But this was not the end. When Dad was carrying him at the sprint down the hotel hallway, my brother woke up and glimpsed back, then he started wailing. "Hurry, Dad, the red woman is reaching for us." Even after they made it to the car, he kept urging Dad to drive faster, claiming that the woman was chasing the car about to catch up. Poor Mom was equally distraught, egging Dad on. Not knowing what was going on but saying their terror was real, Dad put pedal to the metal, even blew through several red lights. Thankfully, we got my brother to the hospital in time. Afterward, the fever went away, but he stayed quiet and withdrawn for about half a month, nothing like his usual rambunctious self. It reminds me of the Grudge. That ghostly pale boy Toshio and the croaking contortionist Kayako. They were the stuff of my childhood nightmares. So does that mean the Grudge is real? Holy crap. In early 2023, I was a student at a university in Haidian District, Beijing. When I was a junior, I started an internship. Coincidentally, a friend of mine worked at a 5-star hotel near the 301 hospital, so she helped me get a job there as a lobby greeter. We have to work 24-hour shifts, mostly just giving directions, helping with the luggage, that kind of thing. The pay and benefits were good and tips from satisfied customers were generous, so life was pretty comfortable for a while. Nights were actually more relaxed since there weren't many people to attend to, so in the later hours, I sneak off to nap in the restroom or luggage rooms. I remember thinking, how did a newbie like me look into such a cushy gig? But of course, that's when the weirdness started happening. Since the hotel was right next to 301 hospital, lots of guests were patients there. So it wasn't surprising that people passed away at the hotel fairly often, but the hotel was always busy and bustling during the day, so I didn't think much of it at first. One night during my shift, the front desk called up saying a guest requests assistance on the 19th floor. I answered the call and tried to help. The 19th was the top floor with a presidential suite and a smaller adjoining suite. That's where the call came from. When the elevator opened on 19th, I was stunned. The lighting was very dim, and the carpeting was this dark, bloody crimson rather than the standard gray. It wasn't right, I thought. That wasn't the deluxe suite floor should be. But at that time, I just figured they'd redecorated this floor for VIP only. As I made my way down the long hallway though, the atmosphere felt heavier and more oppressive. By the time I reached the corner, I was already getting an uneasy feeling. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees and I shuddered, my heart starting to race as a sense of dread came over me. I quickened my pace, no longer checking my phone. At the end of the corridor, I found a young woman hunched, crying by a guest room door, a large pink suitcase beside her. "What's wrong? What happened?" I asked. Between sobs, she said the room felt off and she wouldn't stay, asking me to check her out. Of course, I wasn't willing to do it, so I decided to take a look first. She didn't protest, just keeping her head down crying. I went ahead and opened the door and immediately regretted it. My hair stood on end, a wave of nausea hit me and my head pounding as my vision became clearer. It was like my body was pumping adrenaline, prepping for flight. All these intense reactions flooded over me the second I'd opened that door. The faint breeze from opening the door feeling like it froze my bone. But I was a manager here and didn't want to look like a wimp in front of the crying girl, so I steeled myself and stepped inside. It was a lavish suite down in a traditional Chinese decor, but the usually warm yellow lighting now had an eerie and dim pall cast over everything. I scanned the living area, nothing seemed out of place, and yet the atmosphere had this overwhelming, oppressive, perverse sense of rawness. Maybe morbid curiosity, maybe I was too stunned to think clearly, but after catching my breath, I insisted on heading for the bedroom. The door was ajar, light on inside. Not wanting to barge in, I peeked through the crack at the bed area, which looked normal, then gently nudged the door open with my foot. The second that bedroom door swung wide, the same sense of sickening rawness leapt into me again. Every cell in my body was screaming danger, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it thumping in the silent room. Whatever curiosity I had, it couldn't overcome the primal urge to flee. I did a frantic sweep of the room, then spun around to exit, and that's when I felt something drip onto my head from above the doorway. I helped the shaken girl gather her belongings and we rushed to the elevator. All the way down, I kept trying to reassure her it was probably just a malfunctioning AC unit making it too cold, promising to offer discounts and apologies. But as soon as we reached the lobby, she escaped without a backward glance, flagging down the first taxi like she was fleeing in a haunting house. When I reported the incident to my manager, they just brushed it off and told me to get back to work. It wasn't until I returned to my post that I remembered the drip on my hair. I touched it and it was a brown viscous goop with a scent of sweet and sour. That's when I realized this stuff must have dripped down when I turned to exit the bedroom, which means there was something above the doorway at head level. If I'd looked up as I was checking the room, what horror would I have witnessed? It's been over a year, but thinking back still gives me chills over how reckless I was then. Before leaving the job, I went back up to take one last look out of curiosity. The carpeting and lighting were totally normal, nothing like the nightmarish place I encountered that night. On June 1st, 2015, my friends and I booked a tour to Phuket. It was a couple I was friends with, and another good buddy of mine was actually the tour guide leading the group. We knew each other, so I figured I'd help pad his sales numbers. We arrived at the Phuket airport around 3 p.m. Following the typical itinerary, we were taken by the bus to the seaside village show first, then had dinner before heading to the hotel. It was quite far from the beach area though, so by the time we got checked in and settled, it was already around 9 p.m. The local guide hosting us was a girl nicknamed Yanzi. Turns out she was originally from Guangxi like us, so we immediately felt a connection there. She arranged a 2-bedroom suite for us on the 4th floor, the couple in one room, me and my tour guide buddy in the other. Since there was only one bathroom in the suite, we left all the lights on in the living room, kitchen, and bathroom area to make it easier for midnight toilet runs. Around 12 a.m., we all went into our respective bedrooms to sleep. My friend was pretty excited since it was his first time leading a tour in Thailand, so we ended up chatting until past 2 a.m. before finally passing out. Not sure how long after, I was suddenly jolted awake by a woman's blood-curdling scream. I immediately recognized my friend's wife's voice coming from the living room and instinctively rushed out to check. There she was, standing frozen in the living room, shaking uncontrollably. Face drained of color, pointing a trembling finger towards the balcony. I looked over and was struck by surprise. On the balcony connected to the living room stood a young boy wearing a Thai elementary school uniform with a flat-top haircut. His back was turned as he leaned forward over the railing, gazing off into the distance. Thinking it was an intruder, I yelled out reflexively, "Hey, what are you doing?" The boy turned and scampered off to the right side of the balcony. I dashed out to give chase, but when I reached the balcony area, he had vanished without a trace. Sure, there wasn't a safety grill, but we were on the highest floor and there weren't any drain pipes or structures he could have climbed down quickly. From the time I yelled to when I made it to the balcony was just a couple seconds. If he jumped, I would have heard something for sure, and peering over the edges, not a soul in sight despite the street lamps illuminating the area. My shouting had woken my other friends, who came out to see what was happening. My friend's wife was still white as a sheet, stuttering that she saw the boy when she went to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. We heard about the supernatural occurrences around Thailand before booking this trip, so we were mentally prepared. At that moment, we all agreed it seemed like we'd encountered something paranormal and it was best we not to pursue the truth. Then none of us really slept the rest of the night, smoking and chatting in the lobby until sunrise. Around 8 a.m., Yanzi and the bus driver arrived to pick us up. Taking one look at our haggard faces, she could probably guess most of what happened. The next day of the tour, we were all completely drained and lifeless. Thankfully, Yanzi arranged for us to switch to a different hotel that night. After getting the other guests situated, she called us aside to an open-air bar next to the hotel to chat. Before I could say anything, Yanzi awkwardly admitted, "You all must have encountered some supernatural thing last night, huh?" We silently nodded. She went on to explain that the hotel we stayed at the previous night was called Kanaburi Hotel. It's right across a small street from the beach. If you look closely, you could see a raised flood barrier along the shoreline. That's because the area had been devastated by the 2004 tsunami. When those massive waves hit, the Kanaburi was practically leveled, with dozens killed. In the aftermath, with Thailand's limited forensics capabilities at the time, many bodies couldn't be identified. A number of corpses were even left buried in the debris, unable to be recovered. But because tourism is the economic lifeline for Phuket, the local government rushed to get things back up and running as soon as possible. So in a hurried reopening, to rebuild the Kanaburi Hotel right on top of the wreckage site. Cutting corners to save time, they didn't even dig deep enough to lay a proper foundation. Those unrecovered bodies were just entombed beneath where the new building went up. Ever since reopening, paranormal occurrences have plagued the place non-stop. Some guests reported finding pools of blood on their fleshly made beds that then disappeared before staff could say. Others have fallen asleep on lobby sofas waiting to check in, only to wake up lying on the beach. Employees have witnessed women beckoning them from the hotel entrance, then walking across the street and vanishing into the ocean when followed. So many staffers quit and the owner had to call Buddhist monks from the Bangkok to perform repeated ritual and blessings to suppress the hauntings. Yanzi said while the containment measures helped, incidents still occurred occasionally for guests. But those trapped souls didn't really mean any harm, they were simply lost going through the motions of their former lives. As for why we ended up there, it was because we booked one of the cheapest tour packages. Figures even ghosts like to mess with the budget travelers. Don't blame yourself. Even budget travelers shouldn't encounter such terrifying events, right? It's just poor hotel management. Speaking of the bodies being buried under the foundation, it reminds me of an ancient Chinese ritual called 打生桩. It means to throw a living person into the foundation pit and bury them alive. The sacrificed person had to be a virgin because they believed that a pure soul has strong energy to ward off evil spirits. It is said the Haizhu Bridge, built in 1933, used this method, burying a boy and a girl under the foundation. Of course, after it was built, strange things kept happening and serious car accidents often occurred on that bridge. I guess it was karma. Well, that's it for this video. Next time, we will have a long story that once caused a huge stir on the Chinese internet. See you next Saturday night. Bye bye.